David is 32, hurrying through a freezing Manhattan subway station alone. At 7:30, a sudden collision shatters his isolated routine. A macro shot captures his dark coffee plummeting toward the icy asphalt. Could this mundane urban accident actually reveal our deepest cosmic secret? Look closely at that shattering liquid because it mirrors the universe. The ultimate paradox involves firmly believing your origins lie here in America. You honestly think you belong entirely to this massive concrete city. But actually, you are merely a wandering immigrant from the distant stars. That microscopic drop of spilled dark roast coffee shatters violently against the cold Manhattan concrete pavement. Here is where it gets interesting because that impact perfectly mirrors a much older cosmic collision. Imagine that tiny droplet morphing instantly into a colossal, burning meteorite tearing through the primordial darkness. David stands completely surrounded by thousands of rushing commuters inside the freezing, echoing New York subway. He feels profoundly isolated despite being pressed tightly against the chaotic sea of modern urban humanity. Have you ever felt that crushing sense of loneliness while standing in a crowded American metropolis? This quiet urban isolation experienced by modern Americans perfectly reflects the terrifying existential loneliness of our humanity. We build towering skyscrapers and massive digital networks just to convince ourselves that we belong somewhere. Now listen carefully because this desperate psychological need for connection stretches far beyond the earthly boundaries. We are exactly like David, navigating a crowded universe while feeling entirely disconnected from the system. Our bustling cities are nothing more than microscopic dust specks floating silently within an unimaginably vast void. Why do we still feel so deeply alone when we inhabit such a supposedly vibrant reality? Let us completely zoom out from that busy New York street into the freezing depths of space. Our Milky Way galaxy proudly contains over 400 billion burning suns radiating brilliant golden light. Around those magnificent stars orbit trillions of diverse planets offering infinite possibilities for complex biological evolution. Billions of years have passed, providing more than enough time for advanced alien civilizations to emerge. You would naturally expect this immense galactic metropolis to be overflowing with intelligent beings traversing the cosmos. But the terrifying reality remains that there is absolutely no one. But wait, there is even more to this cosmic puzzle than just the overwhelming silence we observe. Scientists constantly scan the infinite cosmic ocean hoping to intercept even a faint whisper from another civilization. We construct gigantic radio telescopes pointing toward the heavens, desperately waiting for a signal that never arrives. The universe stretches endlessly in every possible direction, creating a horrifying expanse of absolute emptiness and silence. Does this deafening quiet suggest that we are an extremely rare anomaly in a fundamentally dead universe? This endless cosmic void perfectly mirrors the cold indifference of a modern American metropolis during rush hour. Think about walking alone through the darkest alleys of an abandoned city neighborhood during the late night. You see thousands of illuminated windows in massive apartment buildings, yet you never hear a single voice. This is precisely the terrifying essence of the Fermi Paradox that keeps brilliant astrophysicists awake at night. We inhabit an incredibly vast neighborhood filled with countless habitable real estate, yet nobody comes to visit. But the real secret is that this profound emptiness might actually be the ultimate key to survival. Could it be that the universe deliberately isolates its inhabitants to prevent them from destroying each other? Every single atom comprising your body right now was originally forged inside the fiery cores of dying stars. We are literally walking constellations trying desperately to understand our own solitary existence within this freezing expanse. David sipping his coffee on a freezing Monday morning represents 14 billion years of brutal cosmic evolution. Our daily routines in these concrete jungles successfully mask the horrifying reality of our fragile position in space. What happened next in our evolutionary timeline will completely surprise you and shatter your comfortable worldview forever. We must look far beyond the familiar city lights to comprehend the true scale of our cosmic isolation. The burning ocean of primordial fire that birthed our world stands in stark contrast to mundane urban life. We traded the chaotic violence of meteor strikes for the quiet desperation of morning commutes and paying bills. Yet, the very same infinite dark vacuum that surrounds our tiny blue planet also exists deep within us. Our collective human experience is permanently defined by this desperate search for meaning across the endless dark universe. We are undeniably isolated travelers wandering blindly through a majestic galaxy that simply does not care about us. This inescapable reality fundamentally changes how we view ourselves and our ultimate purpose in this vast dark void. The absolute silence from the stars is not just a scientific anomaly, but a deeply profound personal tragedy. Are you ready to discover how this terrifying cosmic loneliness actually birthed the very first living biological cells? Let's think about how we usually picture the absolute very beginning of our own existence. We naturally imagine a perfectly serene sanctuary where everything simply aligned by sheer luck. For generations, we have been comfortably taught the comforting narrative of Charles Darwin's famous warm little pond. Picture a tranquil prehistoric puddle gently baking under a completely mild, golden young sun. Amino acids lazily float around like microscopic alphabet soup, waiting for a miraculous spark of lightning. We love this story. It makes our Earth feel incredibly special, like a carefully curated cosmic nursery designed specifically for our ultimate arrival. It gives us a profound sense of indigenous pride, reassuring us that we are the absolute undisputed masters of this blue marble. Now, here is where it gets incredibly interesting. When you examine the sheer mechanical perfection of early biological architecture, the indigenous masterpiece theory seems entirely logically bulletproof. Think about the eukaryotic cell, which is basically the foundational building block of every complex living organism you see today. The staggering leap from a simple prokaryote to a highly structured eukaryotic organism is absolutely mind-boggling. It is literally the biological equivalent of taking a classic rotary telephone and somehow spontaneously upgrading it into a fully loaded, next-generation iPhone overnight. You have a meticulously organized nucleus acting as the central processor, mitochondria generating endless battery power, and highly specialized membranes functioning like an advanced security firewall. That is a miracle. How could such a spectacularly intricate, meticulously designed biological operating system just randomly assemble itself out of raw stardust? It seems completely obvious that such breathtaking complexity requires a highly stable, deeply nurturing environment to slowly evolve. We naturally look around at our sprawling national parks, our deep emerald oceans, and our perfectly balanced atmospheric pressure, feeling entirely validated. Our planet possesses the exact right gravitational pull to hold onto a life-sustaining atmosphere. It is safely shielded by a massive magnetic field that tirelessly deflects lethal solar radiation. Everything about Earth screams that it is a highly customized, profoundly secure biological fortress. It feels intentionally built to slowly nurture fragile carbon-based life forms into intelligent civilizations. Why would we ever need to look anywhere else for our ultimate origin story when the cradle of humanity looks this incredibly perfect? But the real secret lies hidden deep within the violent geological records of our supposedly peaceful planetary cradle. We have spent centuries constructing this incredibly comforting, logically tight narrative. We love believing that we are the absolute native children of a gentle Mother Earth. We have completely convinced ourselves that our delicate existence was slowly forged in the quiet, undisturbed safety of those warm primordial waters. This flawlessly constructed logical fortress makes us feel remarkably secure as we walk down these bustling city streets. We remain completely oblivious to our true, much darker cosmic heritage. We desperately want to believe that the beautiful miracle of life requires absolute tranquility to successfully take root and ultimately flourish. Is it possible that our fundamental understanding of biological creation is completely, utterly, and terrifyingly backwards? That comforting vision of a peaceful origin is absolutely beautiful, and it is completely wrong. We love to imagine biological life slowly blooming inside a quiet, warm pond. But here is where it gets incredibly interesting for our fragile planet. The truth is that life did not emerge from a gentle period of incubation. Instead of a calm nursery, our planet was locked inside a relentless cosmic slaughterhouse. Does that sound like a place where delicate biological cells could ever survive and evolve? Now listen carefully, because the reality of the Late Heavy Bombardment will truly terrify you. 4 billion years ago, the entire solar system went through a period of absolute madness. Millions of asteroids broke from their normal orbits and began a terrifying migration toward us. Imagine looking up at the modern Manhattan skyline and seeing the entire sky catch fire. A relentless barrage of colossal meteors slammed directly into the primitive crust of our world. These were not just beautiful shooting stars lighting up a quiet midnight sky. They were apocalyptic mountains of solid rock traveling at completely unimaginable and truly terrifying cosmic speeds. Every impact released more explosive energy than all nuclear weapons combined in human history. What happened next will surprise you, as the planetary surface literally boiled away. Primitive oceans were instantly vaporized into massive, thick clouds of superheated steam. The solid ground collapsed as the Earth was completely turned into a molten nightmare. Tsunamis of liquid magma rolled across the surface like monstrous waves crashing on a fragile beach. Nothing could possibly survive in an environment hotter than the surface of Venus. How could organic material endure such a violently extreme and utterly hostile environment? The globe was essentially wrapped in a suffocating blanket of toxic dust and intense fire. From space, our world probably looked like a glowing red ember slowly dying. You might think this brutal chapter represents the absolute destruction of every biological possibility. But wait, there is something much more profound hiding inside this terrifying era of absolute devastation. We tend to view these massive cosmic collisions strictly through the lens of pure tragedy. We imagine that those blazing rocks were sent merely to destroy a peaceful planet. It makes perfect logical sense to assume such extreme heat would sterilize everything permanently. When an entire planet melts into liquid magma, all biological hope seems to instantly disappear forever. Why would the universe subject a promising young world to such an aggressively brutal punishment? It looks exactly like a deliberate attempt to heavily prevent any biological evolution from ever happening. The dark sky rained down heavy destruction without pausing for millions of years. It was the most violently aggressive period that our entire solar system has ever witnessed. But the real secret is something that flips this entire catastrophic narrative completely upside down. That seemingly endless reign of apocalyptic fire was never actually meant to be a burial. Those falling mountains of solid rock were not giant tombstones sent to crush a developing planet. They functioned exactly like heavily armored delivery vehicles carrying something incredibly precious deep inside them. The violent destruction on the surface was simply a dramatic distraction from a much deeper truth. Deep inside those frozen space rocks, safely protected from the blazing heat, lay the ultimate treasure. The brutal late heavy bombardment was not actually an extinction event for our fragile young world. Are you completely ready to drastically change how you view the violent origins of our existence? That catastrophic rain of fire and stone was not the end, but the crucial seed. Every single massive crater left behind by those violent collisions became a cradle for new beginnings. The raw chemical ingredients necessary for complex existence were brutally hammered directly into the planetary crust. Without that terrifying era of massive destruction, our young world would have remained completely, utterly sterile. The pure violence was the exact mechanism required to force a radical transformation on a planetary scale. It completely shatters everything we want to believe about how beautifully gentle nature is supposed to be. We are entirely the resulting biological byproduct of a massive, apocalyptic cosmic accident from the dark past. Could anyone ever guess that our deepest roots are violently anchored in absolute planetary devastation? Those incoming fiery meteors brought the essential building blocks that eventually created everything we see today. You must firmly understand that our entire existence was literally forged in the fires of planetary hell. The vast universe did not gently nurture us, it violently smashed us into an incredibly unlikely existence. The comforting fortress of biological safety has been completely destroyed to reveal a much more terrifying reality. How could delicate biological material possibly survive the absolute freezing vacuum of deep space? It seems entirely illogical when you consider the lethal cosmic radiation bombarding everything outside our atmosphere. We naturally assume that the freezing darkness would instantly obliterate any fragile microscopic strands of early life. Nothing organic should logically remain intact while drifting aimlessly through an endless ocean of pure radiation. Here is where it gets incredibly interesting for anyone questioning the biological origins of human existence. The answer forces us to completely rethink our fundamental understanding of structural planetary defense mechanisms. Think about the virtually indestructible flight recorders retrieved from the wreckage of catastrophic airplane crashes. Engineers designed those heavy titanium black boxes to withstand immense impact forces and extreme blazing temperatures. Nature essentially constructed the exact same protective mechanism using dense rock and heavy metallic elements. A massive asteroid is not merely a destructive weapon hurtling aimlessly through the freezing cosmic void. It actually functions as a brilliantly designed biological transport vehicle shielding its infinitely precious internal cargo. This massive floating mountain of debris remarkably manages to protect the microscopic life hidden secretly inside. Deep inside that frozen outer crust lies a heavily insulated and perfectly preserved biological vault. The exterior rock absorbs the devastating ultraviolet rays and deflects the deeply penetrating radioactive cosmic storms. While the outside freezes at absolute zero, the innermost core remains remarkably stable and securely dormant. Could these silent rocky cocoons be the ultimate cosmic arcs carrying the seeds of future civilizations? That is a possibility we must seriously consider when looking at the terrifying vastness of the universe. The thick layers of ancient cosmic ice act precisely like a heavily fortified thermal survival blanket. The complex molecular strands simply shut down their active processes and enter a state of suspended animation. They wait patiently in the dark for thousands or perhaps even millions of long silent years. Then they violently crash into a habitable environment, and the sudden immense heat awakens the sleeping passengers. What initially looks like a completely catastrophic extinction event is actually a violent but necessary biological delivery. Are these spectacular planetary collisions actually the strictly required ignition sequence for spreading complex life across galaxies? We are finally beginning to realize that the seemingly empty universe actually operates as a massive interconnected biological network. This shocking perspective fundamentally changes how we perceive those blazing meteors tearing through our fragile atmosphere. The blackened outer shell of the cosmic vessel finally cracks open upon the cooling planetary crust. Toxic volcanic gases immediately flood into the microscopic breaches of this shattered alien transportation pod. Now listen carefully, because what crawls out from that darkness is absolutely the stuff of nightmares. It is not a green monster with tentacles, but something infinitely more terrifying and highly efficient. A highly complex molecular machine slowly awakens after surviving millions of years in deep frozen slumber. Can you imagine the sheer resilience required to endure such an incredibly brutal cosmic journey? This microscopic invader possesses a ruthless biological directive hardwired into its intricate double helical chemical structure. It immediately senses the rich chemical soup of its new environment and begins its silent attack. The alien entity deploys microscopic tendrils to violently penetrate the naturally occurring bubbles of local lipids. It ruthlessly hijacks the native chemical processes of the host planet without showing any hesitation whatsoever. But the real secret is how methodically this strange foreign invader consumes the surrounding primordial environment. It greedily absorbs the floating carbon and essential amino acids to forcefully construct exact copies of itself. This relentless replication process resembles a devastating biological virus rapidly consuming a perfectly healthy human host. Have you ever watched a parasitic organism completely take over the vital systems of its victim? The primordial oceans of this young world offer absolutely no defense against such an advanced predator. Every single successful replication exponentially increases the terrifying speed of this silent, invisible planetary hostile takeover. Soon the shallow volcanic pools become completely choked with billions of these ravenous alien biological machines. They fiercely compete against each other for the planet's finite chemical resources in a brutal war. What happened next will surprise you as this microscopic alien army begins to violently mutate itself. They actively develop stronger biological armor and highly aggressive chemical weapons to dominate their new territory. The native geological structures of the planet are slowly buried underneath a rapidly expanding layer of slime. This creeping biological film permanently alters the natural atmospheric composition of the entire defenseless young planet. Would any observer looking at this chaotic scene ever suspect the glorious future of this invasion? The terrifying truth remains that this aggressive colonization process is utterly unstoppable by any natural force. Here is where it gets interesting, because this hostile alien takeover completely redefines the planet's entire destiny. The foreign invaders successfully transform the dead volcanic rock into a massive, globally connected biological engine. They begin harvesting the raw solar radiation from the nearby yellow star to fuel their empire. This horrific parasitic infection fundamentally rewrites the chemical destiny of the entire global oceanic ecosystem forever. Is it not incredibly disturbing to realize how violently this ancient biological colonization was actually executed? The original pristine state of this fiery young world is permanently destroyed by the alien infection. An absolute biological monopoly is firmly established across every single newly formed continent and boiling ocean. The invading microscopic fleet has successfully conquered this remote celestial territory without encountering any significant resistance. This spreading biological plague continuously adapts to survive every single catastrophic environmental change the planet throws. But wait, there is more to this terrifying cosmic horror story than just a simple planetary infection. The relentless microscopic monsters eventually learn how to physically merge together into vastly more complex structures. They slowly build towering biological machines capable of independent movement and highly advanced environmental sensory perception. The alien virus has effectively become the absolute ruling sovereign of this once beautifully barren, rocky world. Could anything possibly stop this terrifying parasitic force from eventually reaching toward the stars once again? This ruthless cosmic invader meticulously prepared the ultimate foundation for an entirely new era of global dominance. The original cosmic spore has officially won the war and permanently claimed this blue planet for itself. Let us leave that chaotic primordial battlefield and return to the present moment. It is exactly 2 in the morning on a freezing rooftop in downtown Chicago. A young college student named Sarah stands completely alone in the biting winter wind. She pulls her thick coat tighter while adjusting the heavy lens of her telescope. Below her feet, the sprawling metropolis glows with millions of isolated neon streetlights tonight. Above her head, a terrifyingly silent ocean of shimmering stars stretches into absolute infinity. Sarah spends her sleepless nights desperately scanning those distant constellations for any faint signal. She represents that deep, unexplainable human obsession with finding someone else in the dark. We are constantly broadcasting our desperate radio waves into the vast emptiness of space. We build massive technological observatories just to listen for a single whisper from the void. This brings us right back to that hauntingly beautiful concept called the Fermi Paradox. With countless habitable worlds scattered across the galaxy, why does the universe remain entirely silent? Now here is exactly where things start getting incredibly fascinating for our lonely astronomer. She feels entirely disconnected from the bustling society grinding away in the city below. That profound sense of urban isolation is mirrored perfectly by our terrifying cosmic loneliness. Are we truly the only conscious beings wandering through this impossibly massive celestial desert? Sarah presses her freezing eye against the cold glass of the telescope eyepiece again. She is desperately looking outward, searching for some exotic alien life form across the universe. Every single human being secretly shares this overwhelming desire to find a cosmic companion. We constantly stare into the abyss because the silence of our solar system feels unnatural. She focuses the heavy mechanical lens onto a distant cluster of ancient burning suns. But what if the profound answer she seeks is not actually out there anywhere? We have spent decades pointing our advanced satellite antennas toward the wrong empty coordinates. The chilling truth about our origin might be hiding much closer to our fragile home. Let's think carefully about that telescope pointing out into the freezing Chicago night. Sarah is desperately scanning the silent void for any faint radio signal of biological existence. We spend billions of taxpayer dollars building massive satellite arrays in the isolated American deserts. We bravely broadcast golden records into the endless dark, hoping someone out there is actually listening. We are entirely obsessed with finding some exotic, highly advanced creature living on a distant exoplanet. The fundamental assumption of our entire civilization is always that we are the native children of this specific solar system. We look out into the vast galaxy as if we are simply staring out from our own comfortable front porch. But the real secret is completely devastating to our deep sense of planetary ownership. Imagine looking straight through that powerful optical lens and pushing the magnification to an impossible godlike extreme. We violently zoom past the familiar craters of our moon and leave the dusty asteroid belt completely behind. We dive deep into the freezing, chaotic cloud of ancient debris sitting at the very edge of the solar system. Let's focus our attention on one specific, unremarkable chunk of ancient ice and rock floating in the absolute darkness. It looks exactly like a completely dead and utterly meaningless piece of cosmic garbage drifting mindlessly through the void. But here is where it gets interesting for our desperate centuries-long search for extraterrestrial life. If you deeply penetrate the frozen outer shell of that ancient meteorite, you find something absolutely miraculous. Wrapped tightly inside the icy crystalline matrix is a complex, intricately folded chain of cosmic biological code. It is a perfectly dormant sequence of alien DNA waiting patiently for a warm place to finally wake up. This fragile molecular structure has incredibly survived millions of years of freezing absolute zero temperatures and deadly cosmic radiation. Now, let's dramatically reverse the camera angle completely and track this exact biological payload as it rapidly moves. The heavily armored rocky capsule accelerates violently toward a young, highly unstable and glowing blue planet spinning in the distance. It violently pierces the primitive atmosphere like a massive flaming spear thrown by the chaotic universe itself. The protective outer shell shatters completely upon brutal impact, violently releasing that alien biological code into the boiling ancient oceans. That highly invasive sequence did not just peacefully coexist with the local primitive chemistry of this newly discovered world. What happened next will surprise you, because it aggressively hijacked the entire planetary ecosystem from the inside out. That relentless biological invader ruthlessly multiplied and mutated through countless unforgiving cycles of violent evolutionary competition. It aggressively conquered the deep toxic oceans, crawled bravely onto the barren land, and eventually built towering steel cities. It constructed massive glowing digital screens and engineered complex optical telescopes just to stare blindly back into the terrifying void. Now the cinematic camera suddenly rushes backward at literal light speed, ripping aggressively through the frozen Chicago night sky, travels straight down the cold metal tube of that exact telescope we were just quietly looking through. The curved glass lens violently magnifies the wet reflection of a tired, lonely, and deeply curious human eye. We have spent countless centuries looking up at the distant stars and desperately begging for mysterious visitors to finally arrive. Are we finally ready to accept the ultimate terrifying truth about our own fundamental biological origins? The fundamental mathematical probability of this cosmic journey completely shatters our comforting illusions of being peacefully indigenous. Every single microscopic cell in your body is currently carrying the exact encrypted blueprint of an interstellar traveler. We are absolutely not the proud biological natives of this rocky blue sphere orbiting an ordinary boring yellow star. We are the highly successful, dominant descendants of an aggressive biological infection that violently fell from the distant sky. Why do we constantly feel so incredibly isolated and deeply lonely in these crowded, noisy American metropolitan cities? Maybe it is simply because our deepest cellular memory still instinctively longs for the freezing darkness of deep space. The extraterrestrial alien that you are so desperately looking for is you. So let us reconsider David rushing through that freezing New York subway station. We must also think about Sarah staring into the cold Chicago night sky. Their profound sense of urban isolation is definitely not a modern psychological condition. This overwhelming metropolitan loneliness actually stems from a deeply ingrained biological reality instead. We constantly feel disconnected because our cellular structures remember a completely different origin. Why do we feel so incredibly lost inside our crowded modern American cities? Our restless human minds are secretly carrying the ancient DNA of cosmic travelers. They are desperately chasing everyday goals while completely ignoring an older cosmic inheritance. That haunting feeling of being an outsider is literally written into our genetics. Now listen carefully, because this completely changes how we view human existence entirely. The theory of panspermia essentially rewrites every biological textbook in our modern schools. We always believed humanity was simply a fortunate accident native to this planet. But the scientific evidence strongly suggests we are actually interstellar refugees seeking shelter. Our fragile bodies are essentially biological spacesuits designed for surviving this specific environment. Every single eukaryotic cell inside you is actually an alien microscopic spacecraft descending. We function exactly like invasive botanical species taking root in foreign organic soil. We are successfully walking around carrying the absolute greatest cosmic secret ever hidden. Does this mean our entire evolutionary history is basically an ongoing alien colonization? Another possibility with this paradigm shift perfectly explains our relentless obsession with rockets. Silicon Valley billionaires constantly spend massive fortunes trying to build advanced interplanetary spacecraft. We pour endless resources into reaching distant planets and exploring hostile alien environments. People normally assume this ambitious cosmic drive simply comes from natural human curiosity. They think we are bravely pushing the absolute boundaries of the unknown universe. Our society glorifies this constant expansion as the ultimate expression of human achievement. Building these massive modern launch vehicles is practically an instinctual biological imperative now. But what if this desperate technological push is not about exploring new frontiers? It is entirely possible that our ambitious space programs are secretly rescue missions. Looking up at the glowing stars is not a terrifying gaze into nothingness. That overwhelming desire to finally conquer the galaxy is actually profound biological homesickness. We are unconsciously trying to find our way back to our original ancestors. The freezing cold universe suddenly feels much warmer when you understand this connection. We are not fragile biological orphans suddenly abandoned on a lonely floating rock. We are the highly resilient surviving children of a spectacular intergalactic journey instead. Our entire human civilization is basically a tiny seed preparing to blossom outward. Leaving this atmosphere is not stepping into the dark, unknown, terrifying cosmic void. Heading back to the distant stars is simply our way of finally returning home. So we finally look up at the infinite night sky with entirely different eyes tonight. We are not just lonely wanderers helplessly drifting through an empty and meaningless cosmic void. We are the highly successful descendants of the greatest biological invasion in planetary history. But the real secret is that solving one cosmic mystery only creates an even darker puzzle. Our ancient biological ancestors successfully crashed into this blue ocean planet billions of years ago. Then we must confront a deeply unsettling truth about our own terrifying cosmic heritage. Who knows where that original flaming meteorite actually started its unbelievably long interstellar journey? Maybe that ancient microscopic spore was violently ejected from a dying solar system far away. Or perhaps it was intentionally engineered and deliberately aimed directly at our young volatile Earth. This horrifying thought completely shatters everything we fundamentally believe about our special place in space. We could simply be an accidental byproduct of a random celestial collision in deep space. Or are we the carefully cultivated biological seeds of a vastly superior alien intelligence? We constantly search the dark galaxy, desperately hoping to finally discover intelligent alien life forms. We might actually just be staring blindly at the scattered remnants of our true homeland. The universe keeps its darkest secrets safely hidden behind an impenetrable veil of endless silence. We have spent centuries anxiously looking outward to finally understand where we truly come from. Yet the ultimate answer has always been quietly hiding inside our own complex genetic code. The most profound mystery of human existence is not whether we are alone right now. The terrifying reality is that we still have absolutely no idea who we actually are. We are permanently trapped inside a never-ending cycle of searching for our own missing beginnings. We must ultimately face the beautiful and terrifying reality of the origin paradox.